Hey friends, ever pictured medieval Japanese castles as nothing but epic samurai battles and dramatic sieges? Well, you're not wrong, but you're also not entirely right. Tonight, we're diving much deeper than clashing swords and towering walls. You might think this video is all about the biggest, baddest fortresses and their military might. But what if I told you it's actually a calming, almost meditative journey into the surprisingly intricate daily life, hidden wisdom, and subtle beauty nestled within these formidable structures? If you find yourself drifting off or simply enjoying the peaceful exploration, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. Only if you truly feel it, though no pressure at all. And I'd genuinely love to know where you're all tuning in from. Drop a comment below with your city and what time it is for you right now. It always makes this feel more like a cozy global gathering. Alright, settle in now. Maybe dim those lights, turn on a fan if you have one, or just get wonderfully comfortable. Let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the precipice of a forgotten age, where time itself moves with the slow, deliberate grace of a carp in a still pond. Before you, a silhouette against the bruised purple of a medieval Japanese dawn, rises the castle. It is not merely a stronghold of timber and stone, but a living, breathing entity. Its very existence woven into the fabric of the land and the souls who inhabit it. You perceive its formidable presence, a testament to an ingenuity born of necessity and fear, yet imbued with a profound, almost spiritual artistry. Consider, for a moment, the essence of this structure. It is a world unto itself, a microcosm of the larger society, its rules as rigid and unyielding as the ancient timbers that form its skeleton. Here, every stone speaks of purpose. Every curve of the wall whispers tales of vigilance. Can you truly grasp the discipline required, the collective will, to erect such a monument in an age devoid of modern marvels? The air itself hums with an unspoken code, a hierarchy as meticulously ordered as the concentric rings of defense that protect this fortress. At its heart, the Tenshukaku, the main keep, pierces the sky, multi-storied declaration of power, both military and symbolic. It is here, within these towering walls, that the daimyo, the feudal lord, holds sway, his authority radiating outwards like ripples from a dropped stone. You see the subtle interplay of light and shadow on its wooden facade, a visual metaphor for the hidden complexities of power. Around the keep, like loyal vassals, stand the Jaegeru, the smaller watchtowers, each a vigilant eye guarding a segment of the perimeter. They are not merely defensive points, they are silent sentinels, embodying the ceaseless watchfulness demanded of this era. What thoughts, you wonder, passed through the minds of those who stood vigil in these towers, staring out at a world both beautiful and terrifying? The primary defense, however, lies not just in height or strategic placement, but in the very layout, the Noabari. Imagine, if you will, a master strategist, rope in hand, meticulously tracing lines across the terrain, shaping the very earth to confound and defeat an invading force. This is not a haphazard collection of barriers, but a calculated labyrinth designed to exhaust, confuse, and ultimately break the will of any aggressor. You see the deep, broad, hoary moats filled with water or cunningly dry, encircling the outer layers, a first line of dissuasion. Beyond them, the dory massive earthen embankments rise at steep angles, challenging any who would dare to scale them. They are a testament to raw human labor, a collective effort of sweat and toil that reshaped the very landscape. How many hands, how many seasons did it take to raise these formidable barriers. And then the Ishigaki, the stone walls, not the smoothly cut, perfectly aligned masonry of later periods, but often a rough, unmortared assemblage of natural stones, each fitted with an intuitive understanding of weight and balance. This Nozorazumi technique, while seemingly crude, offered exceptional drainage and resilience against earthquakes. A practical solution to the unpredictable temper of the land, these walls are not just a shield. They are a silent language of resilience, a dialogue between man and nature. Yet, you also observe the stark contrast to European castles, their thick, impenetrable stone, and realize the distinct character of Japanese ingenuity, reliant on wood's flexibility and the clever manipulation of terrain. This reliance on wood, too, speaks of fire, a constant, flickering threat, both accidental and intentional, a predator unseen but always feared. This constant threat of fire, you see, was not merely an inconvenience, but a profound existential dilemma for these wooden fortresses. Unlike their stone European counterparts, Japanese castles, beautiful in their timber and tile, were inherently vulnerable to the licking tongues of flame. This vulnerability wasn't just a design flaw, it was a fundamental aspect of their being, shaping not only their construction but also the very tactics of both defense and siege. Imagine the desperate energy of a bucket brigade, the frantic shouts, the acrid smoke stinging your eyes, as a stray ember or a deliberately launched fire arrow threatened to unravel years of painstaking construction in mere hours. This inherent fragility, paradoxically, bred a unique kind of strength, a mastery of rapid reconstruction, an acceptance of impermanence. It also underscored the vital importance of water, not just in moats for defense, but in countless wells dug within the castle grounds, ensuring a supply for daily life, for hygiene, and most crucially, for firefighting. You might scoff at the rudimentary nature of their pumps, the simple leather buckets, yet in their time, these were the cutting edge of practical survival, a testament to human ingenuity when faced with immediate, tangible threats. How much of our own daily comfort, you ponder, rests on such seemingly simple, yet utterly vital, solutions that were once matters of life and death. Beyond the material defenses, the true bulwark of the castle lay in its human element. The samurai, they were not merely warriors, they were the living embodiment of the castle's spirit, its eyes, its hands, its very will. Their lives, their honor, their very identity were inextricably linked to this fortress. Their training was ceaseless, brutal, and designed to forge unyielding discipline. You see them, even now, in your mind's eye, practicing with the katana, its curved blade a deadly extension of their spirit, honing their skills with the yari, the spear, a deceptively simple weapon demanding immense precision, and mastering the yumi, the longbow, capable of delivering death from a distance with surprising accuracy. Their existence within the castle walls was a structured performance, a perpetual state of readiness. Every samurai had his designated role, his assigned post, his specific duties within the complex hierarchy. From the elite guard, who stood closest to the daimyo, their loyalty as unquestionable as the rising sun, to the foot soldiers, the ashigaru, whose sheer numbers formed the bulk of the defensive force. Siege played a part in this intricate human machine. Can a society truly function without such a clear delineation of roles, or does true freedom lie in their dissolution? Their daily routines were a study in self-control and meticulous order. Waking before dawn, the air crisp with the smell of wood smoke and damp earth, They would begin their day with ritualistic practices, meditation, physical training, the careful maintenance of their armor and weapons. Every object possessed a spiritual significance, from the lacquered plates of their due chest armor to the finely wrapped hilt of their sword. It was not merely equipment, it was an extension of their being, a conduit for their inner strength. This attention to detail, this reverence for their tools, speaks volumes about a culture that saw divinity in the mundane and discipline in every action. It highlights a philosophical approach to life where mastery over oneself was paramount to mastery over any weapon. This philosophical approach extended far beyond the battlefield, permeating every aspect of their lives within the castle's confines. You observe the subtle ballet of social interaction, the meticulous adherence to etiquette, a silent language of bows and gestures that reinforced the rigid social structure. Even a slight misstep, a forgotten courtesy, could carry significant weight, impacting one's standing, or worse, one's honor. It was a world where performance was paramount, where one's public face, the omote, was carefully crafted and presented, often masking the turbulent currents of ambition, fear, and loyalty that flowed beneath. Consider the meticulous arrangements for meals taken not in boisterous dining halls, but often in quiet, separate chambers, reflecting rank and status. The food itself, simple yet nourishing, was prepared with a practical understanding of available resources: rice, fish, pickled vegetables, miso soup, a diet designed for sustenance and health, not indulgence. Yet, even in this simplicity, there was an unspoken elegance, a careful presentation that spoke to an aesthetic appreciation even for the most basic necessities. It was a stark contrast to the often gluttonous feasts of European nobility, highlighting a different cultural approach to abundance and restraint. Could it be that true luxury lies not in excess, but in the mindful appreciation of what is truly essential? Hygiene, a concept often overlooked in romanticized historical accounts, was also a practical necessity, a subtle battle against disease and discomfort. While not adhering to modern standards, the samurai understood the importance of cleanliness, both for health and for maintaining a sharp mind. You might see designated areas for bathing, using heated water, a luxury in many parts of the world at the time. The care taken with their hair, their clothing, their living quarters, all contributed to a disciplined environment, reducing the spread of ailments that could decimate a garrison. This foresight, this practical wisdom, often went unremarked upon, yet it was as vital to the castle's longevity as its stone walls. The castle, in its deeper symbolism, was also a repository of knowledge, both martial and esoteric. Within its walls, master artisans toiled, refining techniques for forging the perfect katana, constructing the most intricate yumi, or crafting armor that was both protective and flexible. These were not mere crafts. They were disciplines passed down through generations, often imbued with a spiritual dimension, a reverence for the materials and the process. You can almost hear the rhythmic clang of the hammer on steel, the focused breathing of a craftsman shaping wood. This dedication to excellence, this pursuit of perfection in form and function, speaks to a profound respect for skill and mastery. But beyond the overt skills of war and craft, there existed within the castle a subtler, more shadowed realm of knowledge, the pursuit of hidden wisdom, ancient philosophies, and even forgotten histories. It was in the quiet moments, in the hushed conversations between trusted advisors, or in the solitary contemplation of a daimyo in his private chambers, that these deeper currents flowed. Scrolls, painstakingly copied and guarded, contained not just military strategies, but also texts on strategy derived from Chinese classics, on the intricate philosophies of Zen Buddhism, or the subtle art of political maneuvering. The castle, then, was not just a fortress of defense, but a sanctuary for the mind, a place where knowledge was both power and a path to enlightenment. What secrets, you wonder, lay hidden in the dusty corners of these silent libraries, waiting to be rediscovered? And how many such truths remain buried, not in stone, but in the forgotten corners of our own minds, within these same castle walls, where knowledge flowed like a hidden spring? There also resided the practical, often shadowy, art of security and locks. In an age before electronic surveillance and complex key systems, the defense of the daimyos, treasures and secrets relied on ingenious, yet deceptively simple, mechanisms. You might imagine heavy wooden doors, reinforced with iron straps, but their true strength often lay in the cleverness of their locking devices. Consider the common latch and bar mechanism, a rudimentary but effective first line of defense. A heavy wooden bar, sliding into stout iron brackets on either side of the doorframe, could be secured from within. But this was merely the beginning. To prevent entry from without, even for those with malicious intent and a strong pry bar, more intricate solutions were devised. You'd find hidden bolts, often operated by a concealed lever or a discreet push point in the doorframe, known only to a select few. The castle itself became a giant puzzle box, designed to confound and deter. Then there were the padlocks, often crafted from iron, sometimes with surprisingly elaborate designs. These weren't the tiny, easily picked devices of a modern suitcase. Imagine a heavy, hand-forged lock, its body thick and unyielding, its shackle robust enough to withstand significant force. The internal mechanisms, while simpler than a modern pin-tumbler lock, relied on a series of tumblers or wards that had to be aligned perfectly by a specific, often unique, key. The keys themselves were often works of art, large and ornate, a clear indicator of their importance. Possessing such a key wasn't just practical, it was a symbol of trust and authority. How many secrets, you ponder, were safeguarded by the subtle clicks and turns of these ancient mechanisms? What whispers might they have absorbed over centuries of vigilance? The development of these locks was a quiet, unheralded journey of human ingenuity. Each improvement, each new challenge to the locksmith's art, was born from a practical need to protect grain stores, to secure the armory, or, most crucially, to safeguard the daimyo's private quarters and his treasury. The master locksmith was a vital, though often unsung, member of the castle's retinue. His skills as essential as those of the warrior or the strategist. He understood the properties of metal, the mechanics of leverage, and the psychology of deterrence. He wasn't just building a device. He was constructing a barrier of trust and secrecy. Yet, you must also acknowledge the inherent limitations. No lock, no matter how clever, was truly impregnable to a determined and resourceful adversary. Force, given enough time and tools, could overcome most physical barriers. This reality led to a philosophical understanding that true security lay not just in the strength of the lock, but in the human vigilance that accompanied it. Sentries, patrols, the keen eyes of guards, these were the ultimate security system. The lock bought time, but the human element provided the ultimate defense. This duality, the interplay between inanimate protection and living watchfulness, was a constant tension within the castle walls. It forces one to ask, can true safety ever be found solely in material defenses? Or does it always, inevitably, come down to the human spirit, and its unwavering commitment. And then, beyond the tangible defenses of stone, wood, and iron, beyond the vigilant eyes of the samurai, lay the most insidious, and often the deadliest, element in the medieval power game: poison. It was the silent killer, the invisible blade, a weapon of whispers and shadows, perfectly suited for the intricate, often brutal, dance of political dynamics within and between the great feudal houses. You are acutely aware that in an era where direct confrontation often meant massive casualties and prolonged sieges, poison offered a subtle, efficient, and deniable alternative. It was a tool of the desperate, the ambitious, and the cunning. Its very nature made it terrifying, a betrayal of trust, a perversion of the most intimate acts of daily life: a meal shared, a drink offered, a medicinal draught administered. Can a society, built on hierarchies and allegiances, ever truly be secure when such a silent threat lurks in the background? The pursuit of hidden wisdom, often discussed in whispers, sometimes included a darker, more practical knowledge: the identification and preparation of toxic substances, not the crude, obvious poisons that caused immediate and violent death, but the subtle ones, designed to mimic natural illness, to bring about a slow decline, or to induce a state of weakness that could be exploited. Imagine the quiet studies, the carefully guarded texts, describing the properties of various herbs, fungi, and minerals, knowledge held by a select few. Often the court physician, the alchemist, or the shadowy figure operating in the daimyo's service. The use of poison was a high-stakes game, demanding immense planning and secrecy. It required access, opportunity, and an understanding of human nature, especially the trust that one places in those closest to them. The unsuspecting daimyo might fall ill after a seemingly innocuous meal, or a rival lord might waste away from a mysterious ailment, his demise attributed to natural causes, leaving no trace of foul play. This ambiguity was part of its power, allowing the perpetrator to remain unblemished, their hands seemingly clean. The castle kitchens, the very heart of nourishment, could also become a potential nexus of danger. The preparation of food was a meticulous process, but in an environment where loyalty could be bought and sold, vigilance was paramount. You can envision tasters, a common fixture in noble households, taking the first bite, a grim duty that underscored the constant threat. Or perhaps the daimyo might employ a trusted cook, whose loyalty was beyond question, often a member of a hereditary line of servants. Yet, even then, the vulnerability lingered. This dark art highlights a critical aspect of medieval power dynamics: that security was never absolute. Despite walls, guards, and locks, the most dangerous threats often came from within, from the very people who were supposed to be most loyal. It forced those in power to cultivate a profound sense of skepticism, to constantly assess the true intentions of those around them, and to operate in a perpetual state of quiet suspicion. It reminds us that power, at its core, is a fragile construct, constantly under siege, not just from external enemies, but from the insidious forces of ambition and betrayal that lurk in the human heart. How truly different, you might ask, is this internal struggle for power from the corporate boardrooms and political arenas of your own time? The methods may have evolved, but the underlying human drama remains remarkably consistent. And yet, despite the ever-present shadow of poison and betrayal, despite the grinding practicalities of survival, the medieval castle was also a crucible for the pursuit of beauty. This wasn't merely an aesthetic indulgence, but a profound cultural imperative, a reflection of status, spiritual belief, and a deeply ingrained appreciation for harmony and form. You observe the meticulously raked gravel of a Zen garden, a miniature landscape designed for contemplation, its patterns as precise as a mathematical equation, yet conveying a sense of profound tranquility. This juxtaposition, the serene beauty alongside the harsh realities of war, is a hallmark of this era. The castle architecture itself, while functional, was imbued with beauty. The graceful curve of the roof tiles, the intricate wooden carvings adorning eaves and pillars, the subtle interplay of light and shadow on the sliding fusuma doors, these were not accidents of construction. They were the deliberate creations of master craftsmen, artists, who understood that even a fortress could be a work of art. The natural materials, wood, paper, earth, and stone, were respected and celebrated for their inherent qualities, transformed with skill into structures that felt intrinsically connected to the landscape. Does modern architecture, in its quest for efficiency and scale, ever truly achieve such a harmonious blend of function and profound beauty? Inside the castle, the pursuit of beauty intensified. The daimyo's private chambers, while still designed for defense and security, were often adorned with exquisite byobu folding screens depicting landscapes, scenes from literature, or intricate patterns. These were not merely decorations, they were often storytelling devices, philosophical aids, or even strategic maps disguised as art. The calligraphy on a scroll, the delicate arrangement of flowers in an ikebana display, the precise placement of a single valuable tea bowl for a ceremony. Each act was an expression of aesthetic consciousness, a mindful engagement with the world. The very rituals of daily life became artistic performances. The tea ceremony, for instance, was far more than simply preparing and drinking tea. It was a highly ritualized, contemplative practice, a performance of profound beauty and spiritual significance. Every movement, every gesture, every object used, from the humble tea whisk to the priceless ceramic bowl, was imbued with meaning. It was an escape from the brutality of the world, a moment of fleeting perfection, a shared experience of harmony and respect. You can almost feel the quiet intensity of such a gathering, the soft murmur of silk against silk, the gentle steam rising from a delicate cup. This emphasis on beauty also extended to the martial arts. The movements of the samurai, when performed with mastery, were considered a form of moving art, a dance of deadly grace. The precision of their swordsmanship, the fluidity of their unarmed combat, the almost poetic rhythm of their archery, these were honed not just for effectiveness, but for aesthetic perfection. The pursuit of mastery in any discipline, whether art or war, often converged on this point, the ideal fusion of form and function. Yet, this pursuit of beauty had its societal implications. It wasn't equally accessible to all. The most exquisite objects, the most refined performances, were the prerogative of the elite. Beauty became a symbol of status, a display of wealth and power, often reinforcing the very hierarchies that defined medieval society. The elaborate silks of the daimyo contrasted sharply with the rough homespun of the peasant. So, you ponder, is beauty an inherent human aspiration, or is its expression always, in some way, shaped and constrained by the societal structures in which it exists? And how much of what we deem beautiful today is still subtly influenced by similar, unspoken, power dynamics? The stark contrast between the elite's refined world of beauty and the grueling realities of daily life for the vast majority was a perpetual undertone within and around the castle walls. While the daimyo might contemplate the perfect curve of a tea bowl, the peasants in the surrounding fields wrestled with the brutal practicalities of survival. Their lives revolved around the rhythms of nature, the relentless demands of the land, and the constant struggle against scarcity. You see them, even now, in the mind's eye, bent double in the paddy fields, their backs aching, their hands immersed in cool, muddy water, planting the precious rice seedlings that would feed the castle and themselves. Their tools were simple, forged from iron by local smiths, and passed down through generations. The kuwa hoe, the suki spade, the gamma sickle, each instrument a testament to an enduring connection with the earth, a direct translation of human effort into sustenance. What ingenuity, you reflect, lies in the simple, effective design of these humble implements, perfected over centuries of trial and error. Food, the most fundamental of all needs, was a constant preoccupation. While the castle enjoyed a certain degree of security in its stores, the peasants lived perpetually on the edge of want. A bad harvest, a prolonged drought, a sudden flood, any of these natural calamities could spell starvation. Their diet was largely vegetarian, dictated by necessity and what the land could yield. Rice, barley, millet, soybeans, and various wild greens. Fish, if they lived near a river or coast, provided a vital source of protein, but meat was a rare luxury, reserved for special occasions or the tables of the elite. The simple, cyclical nature of their meals, often just to a day, reflected a deep understanding of resource management, a stark lesson in living within one's means. Shelter for these common folk was equally pragmatic. Their homes, humble thatch-roofed dwellings made of wood and mud, were designed for warmth in winter and coolness in summer. Their materials sourced directly from the surrounding forest and earth. They were built collectively, a community effort, embodying a spirit of mutual reliance that was essential for survival. You observe the ingenuity in their construction: raised floors to deter dampness and pests, open hearths for cooking and warmth, and movable screens to adapt to changing seasons. These homes, while far from luxurious, were perfectly adapted to their environment, a testament to practical engineering born from generations of accumulated wisdom. And then there was fire, not just a threat from siege, but a daily necessity and a constant danger. It warmed their homes, cooked their food, and provided light in the long, dark evenings. But it also represented perpetual risk. A spark from the hearth, a forgotten ember, could engulf a village in minutes, leaving families homeless and destitute. The pragmatic solutions, like storing water barrels near homes and having communal firefighting tools ready, underscore the relentless battle against this powerful, fickle element. How many stories, you wonder, passed down through the generations, were born from the terror and awe inspired by uncontrolled flame? The daily struggle for practical survival shaped not only their bodies but their very worldview. It bred resilience, patience, and an intimate knowledge of the natural world. Their lives were an ongoing negotiation with forces beyond their control, a stark reminder of humanity's enduring vulnerability in the face of nature's power. Yet, within this struggle, there was also profound ingenuity, an adaptive spirit that ensured the continuation of life, generation after generation. It begs the question, in our increasingly mediated and comfortable world, have we lost something vital by distancing ourselves from these fundamental challenges of existence? Have we forgotten the practical wisdom born from necessity, the daily rhythms of the peasant's life, inextricably linked to the land and its cycles, stood in stark contrast to the intricate social dynamics and performance that characterized life within the castle walls? For the samurai, and especially For the daimyo and his inner circle, existence was a perpetual stage play, where every gesture, every word, every subtle shift in posture carried immense weight. You are drawn into this world of nuanced power, where appearances often trumped reality, and where a mistake in etiquette could be as devastating as a tactical blunder on the battlefield. Imagine the formal audiences. With the daimyo, the precise bowing, the measured responses, the deliberate choice of words. It was a performance designed to reinforce hierarchy, to demonstrate loyalty, and to subtly assert one's own position within the complex web of relationships. The daimyo himself was the central figure in this elaborate drama, his presence commanding deference, his pronouncements law. His every action was observed, interpreted, and often emulated. Can true authenticity ever thrive in such a meticulously choreographed environment, or is it inevitably sacrificed at the altar of social order? Within the hierarchical structure, the concept of face was paramount. Losing face, whether through public humiliation, a perceived insult, or a failure to meet expectations, could be ruinous. It wasn't just about personal reputation. It impacted one's family, one's clan, and one's lord. This pervasive concern for reputation often led to a culture of indirect communication, where true intentions were veiled, and subtle cues were exchanged to avoid direct confrontation or offense. You observe the quiet conversations, the knowing glances, the unspoken understandings that conveyed more than explicit words ever could. The constant need to perform extended to military affairs as well. Even during peacetime, military drills were not just about honing skills. They were also displays of strength, discipline, and readiness. The grand processions of samurai, their armor gleaming, their banners unfurled, were potent symbols of the daimyo's power, intended to impress allies and deter rivals. It was a visual spectacle, a theatrical assertion of authority that often preceded or accompanied actual military maneuvers. Even the aesthetic choices, as you've observed, played into this societal performance. The exquisite tea ceremony, the perfectly arranged flower, the finely crafted sword, these were not merely expressions of beauty but also markers of refinement, education, and status. To appreciate and engage with these arts was to demonstrate one's cultivation, an essential aspect of being a well-rounded samurai, not just a brute warrior. This blending of the aesthetic with the practical and the political paints a rich, complex picture of their values. However, beneath this veneer of order and performance lay the constant currents of ambition, rivalry, and insecurity. Clans jockeyed for influence, individuals sought advancement, and the fear of disgrace or disfavor was never far away. The castle, for all its outward stability, was a pressure cooker of human emotions, where loyalty was constantly tested and betrayal was an ever-present possibility. It forces you to consider the enduring human struggle for recognition and power, a struggle that transcends eras and cultures. How much of what we do, even today, is a performance for others, a subtle negotiation of our place within a larger, unspoken hierarchy, and at what cost do we maintain these carefully constructed facades? This constant societal performance, the intricate dance of social dynamics, was inextricably linked to the very concept of honor, a cornerstone of samurai existence, a word whispered with reverence and defended with ferocity. You understand that honor, for the samurai, was not merely a personal virtue, but a public trust, a reflection of their very being and their family's legacy. It was the intangible currency by which their worth was measured in the rigid hierarchy of the medieval age. To lose honor was to lose everything: respect, standing, even the right to live. This profound concept underpinned their stoicism in the face of death, their unwavering loyalty, and their often austere lifestyles. A samurai's honor was tied to his daimyo, to his clan, and to the strictures of the warrior code, Bush. The way of the warrior, though not formally codified until later, its principles were deeply ingrained in the samurai psyche: loyalty, courage, integrity, compassion, and self-control. You observe the quiet dignity in their bearing, the disciplined control over their emotions, even in moments of great stress. This self-mastery was not just a personal trait, it was a public declaration of their adherence to this demanding code. This commitment to honor often led to practices that, to a modern eye, might seem extreme, even barbaric. Seppuku, or ritual suicide, was the ultimate act of reclaiming lost honor, or demonstrating unwavering loyalty in the face of defeat or perceived disgrace. It was a grim, profound performance, a final assertion of control in a world where control was often fleeting. You recognize that this was not an act of weakness, but of immense, almost unfathomable strength, born from a spiritual conviction that honor was more valuable than life itself. It forces you to confront the very different cultural frameworks through which human suffering and dignity are understood. Can such an absolute commitment to an ideal ever truly be understood by a society that often prioritizes individual survival above all else? The implications of honor extended into every interaction, shaping alliances, feuds, and even negotiations. A perceived slight to one's honor could ignite a clan war, while a demonstration of impeccable honor could forge unbreakable bonds. It was a complex moral compass, guiding decisions far beyond simple pragmatism. Promises, once made, were sacred. Oaths, once sworn, were binding. The weight of these commitments was heavy, shaping the destinies of individuals and entire domains. Even the everyday objects within the castle resonated with this concept. The beautifully crafted katana was not just a weapon. It was the soul of the samurai, an object imbued with spiritual significance and honor. To draw it unnecessarily was a grave insult. To handle it carelessly was a sign of disrespect. Its very existence was a constant reminder of the samurai's duty, their honor, and their readiness for ultimate sacrifice. Yet you also discern the subtle ironies within this rigid framework. While honor demanded unwavering loyalty, the political landscape was rife with betrayals and shifting allegiances. The constant threat of espionage and the insidious use of poison, as you have considered, often operated directly against the principles of open and honorable conduct. This tension between the proclaimed ideals of Bushido and the ruthless realities of power politics created a complex moral landscape, where individuals often found themselves navigating difficult ethical dilemmas. It was a world where the pursuit of an ideal sometimes clashed violently with the exigencies of survival, leaving you to ponder in the eternal dance between principles and pragmatism, which force ultimately holds greater sway over human actions. This intricate dance of honor and pragmatism, constantly playing out within the castle walls, created an environment ripe for the quiet, pervasive presence of espionage. While not always dramatic and cloak and dagger, as in later eras, the collection of information was a vital, often life-saving, function in the volatile world of medieval Japan. You understand that knowledge was power, and accurate intelligence could mean the difference between victory and annihilation. Imagine the various forms this subtle art took. It wasn't always about secret agents infiltrating enemy strongholds, though such daring feats certainly occurred. More often, it involved a network of informants, traveling merchants, Buddhist monks, wandering ronin, masterless samurai, even seemingly innocuous peasants moving between domains. These individuals, through casual conversations and keen observation, could gather vital scraps of information: troop movements, harvest yields, the mood of the local populace, or whispers of dissent within a rival lord's court. You see the subtle exchange of glances, the quiet conversations in village inns, the seemingly innocent questions that masked a deeper purpose. The castle itself was a hub for this intelligence gathering. Messengers arrived, bearing not just official dispatches but also verbal reports, filtered through multiple layers of interpretation. The daimyo and his trusted advisors would sift through this influx of information, trying to discern truth from rumor, fact from deliberate misinformation. It required a sharp, discerning mind, capable of piecing together fragmented data into a coherent picture. How many critical decisions, you wonder, hinged on the accuracy of such intelligence, and how many costly blunders were born from its failure? Within the castle, the daimyo also needed to know the pulse of his own domain. This led to a quieter form of internal monitoring. Loyal retainers might report on the sentiment of other samurai families, any signs of disloyalty, or even minor infractions that could hint at larger problems. This was not always about malicious intent. Sometimes it was simply a necessity for maintaining order and preventing small issues from escalating into full-blown rebellions. It was a delicate balance between trust and necessary vigilance, a constant assessment of who could truly be relied upon. The use of disguise was rudimentary but effective. A samurai might shed his distinctive armor and blend in as a common traveler, his sword hidden beneath a simple kimono, his noble bearing suppressed. Or a female agent, perhaps a kunoichi female ninja, though their historical role is often exaggerated in popular culture, might use her perceived harmlessness to gain access to information in ways a male warrior could not. Their strength lay in their ability to be overlooked, to be perceived as non-threatening. This highlights the power of perception, and how readily we categorize and dismiss those who do not fit our immediate expectations. Ultimately, espionage in medieval Japan was a testament to human resourcefulness and the enduring human need to understand and control one's environment. It was a constant game of shadows, played by individuals who operated in the grey areas between honor and necessity, their successes often unacknowledged, their failures potentially catastrophic. It begs the question: in any hierarchical system, is some level of covert information gathering not simply a tool of power, but an inescapable feature of its maintenance, a constant vigilance against the unknown? And how much of our modern world is simply a technological extension of this ancient human impulse? This ceaseless dance of power, information, and the ever-present threat of betrayal meant that trust was a commodity, rarer and more valuable than gold within the castle's stone corridors. In a world where allegiances could shift with the wind, and where a hidden dagger or a poisoned cup might lurk behind a polite smile, discerning true loyalty from mere performance was a constant, grueling task for the daimyo and his inner circle. You witness the subtle ways trust was built, tested, and sometimes irrevocably broken. It was forged in shared hardship, in battle, in decades of unwavering service. A retainer whose family had served the daimyo's clan for generations often held a deeper, more inherent trust than a newly acquired ally, however seemingly powerful. This was the weight of hereditary loyalty. a concept deeply ingrained in the social fabric, where one's ancestors' faithfulness contributed to one's own standing. Can such inherited trust truly exist, or is it merely a more convenient form of expectation? Yet, even inherited loyalty was not foolproof. Ambition could corrupt even the most steadfast heart, and the lure of greater power or wealth from a rival lord could prove irresistible. This meant constant vigilance, subtle tests of loyalty, and the keen observation of behavior, both overt and subtle. A sudden change in a retainer's demeanor, an unusual absence from court, a too eager offer of assistance, all could be red flags in this intricate human game. The castle's very layout reflected this cautious approach to trust. The innermost sanctums, particularly the daimyo's private chambers and the treasury, were protected by multiple layers of security, both physical and human. Only the most trusted confidants, often a small circle of long-serving samurai and family members, had unrestricted access. Even then, their movements and interactions were implicitly observed, their loyalty silently affirmed or questioned. You feel the constant, unspoken pressure of being under scrutiny, even by those you serve. Conversely, the lack of trust could be crippling. A daimyo surrounded by disloyal or opportunistic retainers was perpetually vulnerable, his authority undermined from within. This led to strategies of divide and conquer, of balancing rival factions within his own retainers, ensuring that no single group became too powerful or cohesive in their disloyalty. It was a complex, often exhausting, managerial task, requiring shrewd political acumen and a deep understanding of human psychology. The subtle, often unspoken pacts of trust also extended to the alliances forged between different These were often cemented through marriages, the exchange of hostages, often young sons or daughters sent to live in another lord's castle, a grim demonstration of commitment, or elaborate ceremonies involving sworn oaths and symbolic gifts. These were attempts to solidify trust through ritual and mutual obligation. Yet the fragile nature of these alliances was a constant source of anxiety. The medieval landscape was littered with broken promises and betrayed allegiances, demonstrating the inherent difficulty in building lasting trust in a world defined by power struggles. Ultimately, the quest for reliable trust was an unending challenge. It forced individuals to become astute judges of character, to read between the lines, and to understand the motivations that drove human action. It highlights a timeless truth, that while physical defenses can protect against external threats, the greatest vulnerabilities often lie within the human heart itself. So, you might reflect, is trust ever truly given unconditionally, or is it always, in some way earned, maintained, and continually re-evaluated? Even in our own time, the relentless pursuit of trust, both within the castle's human ecosystem and in the wider political landscape, inevitably led to the development of sophisticated communication networks. In an age devoid of instant messaging or widespread literacy, the transmission of vital information was an art form in itself, requiring ingenuity, speed, and discretion. You witnessed the elaborate systems designed to overcome the inherent challenges of distance and terrain, ensuring that the daimyo's commands reached their intended recipients, and that intelligence flowed back to the castle keep. Consider the role of messengers, the living arteries of the daimyo's authority. These individuals, often chosen for their endurance, their unwavering loyalty, and their keen observational skills, traversed vast distances, often on foot or horseback. They carried not just written dispatches, but also verbal messages, often encoded or delivered with specific inflections to convey subtle meanings. The risk was immense. ambushes by rival clans, natural disasters, or simply the exhaustion of the journey. Their safe passage was paramount, sometimes involving escorting samurai or clever disguises to avoid detection. You can almost feel the rhythmic pounding of their feet on dusty roads, the wind whipping past their ears, the weight of their responsibility pressing down. For more critical or sensitive information, secret codes and ciphers were employed. These were not complex cryptographic algorithms of the digital age, but ingenious substitutions, symbolic representations, or prearranged phrases known only to the sender and receiver. A seemingly innocent poem might hold a hidden military order, or a passage about the weather could convey details of troop strength. This reliance on shared knowledge and memorized sequences highlights a profound understanding of information security long before the term was even conceived. It forces you to consider the enduring human desire to protect secrets, and the timeless struggle between concealment and revelation. Beyond the formal messengers, the castle also relied on its network of spies and informants. As you've observed, these individuals didn't just gather intelligence, they were also conduits for specific, carefully crafted messages. A rumor deliberately started in a rival domain, a piece of misinformation leaked through an unsuspecting merchant, a subtle promise whispered to a wavering retainer. These were all forms of communication designed to influence events from afar. The forest paths, the village markets, the tea houses, all became informal channels for the dissemination of influence and manipulation. The castle's defenses, too, communicated its power. The very sight of its towering walls and formidable presence sent a clear message to potential adversaries. Approach at your peril, banners flying atop the keep, signaling the daimyo's presence or a state of alert, were visual communications understood across the landscape. Even the sound of the great bell, rung in times of emergency or celebration, was a form of mass communication, instantly conveying urgency or joy to all within earshot. Yet, you must also acknowledge the inherent limitations of this communication. Delays were inevitable, information could be corrupted, and misinterpretations were common. The fluidity of language, the nuances of regional dialects, and the subjective filters of individual perception all contributed to the challenges. This often led to a deep emphasis on redundancy, sending the same message via multiple channels, or through different messengers, hoping that at least one would reach its destination accurately. It was a practical, albeit laborious, solution to the problem of unreliable communication. Ultimately, the mastery of communication was a critical skill for any successful daimyo. It allowed them to extend their influence beyond the physical confines of the castle, to coordinate their forces, to manage their domain, and to navigate the treacherous waters of medieval politics. It reinforces the idea that human progress, even in seemingly simple forms, is often driven by the fundamental need to connect, to inform, and to influence. How much of our own modern world's complexity, you ponder, is built upon the same fundamental need, albeit with vastly different tools. The vast distances and formidable landscapes through which these vital communications flowed underscore the profound challenge of travel and logistics in medieval Japan. For a daimyo to project power beyond the immediate vicinity of his castle, to move troops, supplies, or even himself, was an immense undertaking, a logistical puzzle demanding meticulous planning and considerable resources. You begin to grasp the sheer physical effort and organizational genius required to orchestrate such movements in an age devoid of mechanized transport or paved roads. Consider the road network, or rather, the lack thereof. while some major routes, like the Takeda linking Kyoto and Edo later Tokyo, existed, they were often little more than dirt paths, prone to mudslides, flooding, and banditry. Bridges were scarce, and river crossings often involved precarious ferries or dangerous fords. This meant that travel was slow, arduous, and fraught with peril. A journey that might take hours in your modern vehicle could consume days or even weeks for a medieval traveler, their pace dictated by the terrain, the weather, and the ever-present threat of ambush. You feel the grit of the dirt beneath your mental feet, the ache in your phantom muscles after a long day's march. The movement of troops was a logistical nightmare. Feeding and supplying an army on the march required an enormous support infrastructure. Provisions, rice, dried fish, miso, had to be sourced, packed, and transported, often on the backs of porters or oxen. Water sources had to be identified, and temporary camps established. The sheer volume of supplies needed for even a modest force meant that foraging, though frowned upon, was often a grim necessity in enemy territory, leading to friction with local populations. The coordination of different units, the maintenance of formation, and the constant vigilance against surprise attacks added layers of complexity. This was not a swift, decisive advance, but a grinding, deliberate process. Equipment and armaments also presented significant logistical challenges. Armor was heavy, swords required careful maintenance, and large numbers of spears and bows needed to be transported. Ammunition, in the form of arrows or later, gunpowder, had to be protected from the elements. Siege engines, when employed, were often constructed on site from local timber, or painstakingly disassembled and transported in pieces. This reliance on local resources for certain elements of warfare speaks to a pragmatic adaptability in the face of logistical constraints. The concept of supply lines was rudimentary but vital. Interrupting an enemy's supply route was a common and effective tactic, often more devastating than a direct assault. A castle, however formidable, could be starved into submission if its access to food and water was severed. This made the protection of one's own routes and the disruption of an enemy's a central tenet of medieval strategy. You see the subtle cat-and-mouse game played out across the landscape, not with grand battles, but with skirmishes over vital choke points and water sources. Even the daimyo's personal travel was an elaborate affair, often involving a large retinue of samurai, servants, and porters. This was not just for security. It was a display of power and prestige, a mobile manifestation of his authority. The very act of his movement was a political statement, demanding respect and obedience from the lands he traversed. Ultimately, the limitations of travel and logistics in medieval Japan profoundly shaped warfare, politics, and the very structure of society. It dictated the size and duration of campaigns, reinforced the importance of local self-sufficiency for castles, and limited the reach of central authority. It forces you to appreciate the immense physical effort that underpinned this era. A world where every journey was an adventure, every shipment a challenge, and every movement a testament to human endurance and ingenuity against the formidable resistance of the natural world. How much of our modern impatience, you muse, is simply a forgetting of these ancient, visceral struggles against distance and time. The formidable challenges of travel and logistics, the ever-present threat of scarcity, and the underlying vulnerability to natural forces meant that resource management within the castle and its surrounding domain was not merely an administrative task, but a life or death necessity. You observe the meticulous planning and foresight required to sustain a large population, both warrior and civilian, through seasons of plenty and, more critically, through seasons of hardship or siege. At the heart of this lay the management of food and water. The castle's Kuragura storehouses were the very arteries of its survival, filled with carefully preserved rice, dried fish, miso, salt, and other staples. Imagine the quiet, methodical work of peasants bringing in the harvest, the careful measurement and storage of grains, the vigilant protection of these vital supplies from vermin, dampness, and theft. The daimyo understood that a well-stocked granary was as important a defense as a strong war. This often meant imposing strict taxes on the local peasantry in the form of rice, ensuring the castle's reserves were always replenished. It was a symbiotic, if often unequal, relationship. The peasants provided sustenance, and the castle offered protection. Water was equally crucial. Beyond the moats, which served as a first line of defense, numerous wells were dug within the castle grounds, often deep and strategically placed to ensure a continuous supply even under siege. These wells were maintained with great care, their purity a matter of constant vigilance. You can almost hear the creak of the well sweep, the splash of water, the quiet relief of a thirst quenched. The ability to deny an enemy access to water, or to preserve one's own supply, was a critical factor in any prolonged conflict. Beyond food and water, the management of timber and iron was paramount. Wood was the primary building material for castles, homes, and countless tools. Forests were not just wild spaces, they were vital resources, carefully managed and harvested. You perceive the sounds of axes echoing through the woods, the creak of timber being hauled. Iron, though scarcer, was indispensable for weapons, tools, and the crucial components of locks and defenses. The local blacksmith, with his glowing forge and rhythmic hammering, was an essential figure, his skill vital to the castle's self-sufficiency. This reliance on natural resources and skilled labor highlights a different kind of economy, one deeply integrated with its immediate environment. The careful management of these resources extended to manpower. The daimyo had to balance the needs of agriculture with the demands of military service. Peasants, while essential for food production, could also be conscripted into the ashigaru foot soldiers during times of war. This careful allocation of human resources, often dictated by the seasons and the prevailing political climate, was a delicate act of governance. The loss of too many laborers to war could lead to famine, undermining the very base of the daimyo's power. Even seemingly minor resources, like straw for thatch, reeds for mats, or clay for pottery, were managed with an eye towards sustainability and long-term viability. Nothing was wasted. Everything had a purpose. This was a world of meticulous efficiency born not from technological advancement, but from necessity and a profound understanding of natural cycles. The constant pressure of resource management cultivated a deep sense of pragmatism and resilience. It forced communities to be largely self-sufficient, to plan for lean times, and to adapt to unexpected challenges. It was a testament to human ingenuity in optimizing limited means, a philosophy of making do and making the most of what was available. You reflect, in a world often characterized by excess and instant gratification, what lessons could be gleaned from this ancient wisdom of careful stewardship and sustainable living. Perhaps the greatest wealth was not in accumulation, but in the intelligent management of the bare essentials, the meticulous resource management, the constant vigilance, and the pervasive emphasis on practicality. All converged within the castle's very essence, transforming it from a mere structure into a powerful symbolism of security and control. You realize that the castle was not just a place where power resided, it was power made manifest, a tangible representation of the daimyo's authority, stability, and enduring will in a chaotic world. Consider its sheer scale and visual impact. Rising above the surrounding villages and fields, often atop a natural elevation, the castle dominated the landscape. Its multi-tiered tenchikaku, often painted white or black, with its distinctive curved eaves, was an unmistakable beacon. To those within its domain, it represented protection, a haven against external threats. To rivals, it was a defiant challenge, a declaration of strength that could not be ignored. Its presence alone communicated a deep-seated desire for order amidst disorder. The very concept of control was woven into its design. The layers of concentric defenses, moats, earthen walls, stone walls, and intricate gate systems were physical manifestations of controlled access. Every approach was surveyed, every entry point guarded. Visitors were funneled through winding paths, Masugata, forced to turn their backs to archers multiple times, their movements meticulously observed. This wasn't just about military defense. It was about regulating flow, about asserting dominance over movement and presence. You can almost feel the psychological effect of being processed through such a deliberate, restrictive pathway. Even the internal layout of the castle reinforced this control. The daimyo's private quarters were typically at the highest, most secure levels of the Tenshukaku, symbolically placing him above all others. Access to him was highly restricted, managed through a series of chambers and guarded passages, each serving as a filter, allowing only the most trusted individuals to approach. This physical distancing reinforced his supreme authority and untouchable status. The castle also symbolized order and discipline. Its walls contained a highly structured society, where every samurai, every servant, every artisan had a defined role and a clear place in the hierarchy. The daily routines, the rigorous training, the strict adherence to etiquette, all contributed to an environment of meticulous organization. It was a machine, finely tuned, designed to operate with maximum efficiency and minimal friction, in a world prone to anarchy and sudden shifts. The castle stood as an island of imposed order. However, you also discern the subtle, underlying tension in this symbolism. While it projected absolute security, you know from your observations that true security was often elusive, compromised by internal betrayals or the silent threat of poison. While it symbolized unwavering control, the daimyo himself was often subject to the whims of larger political forces, the demands of his own clan, or the unpredictable turns of human ambition. The perfect, impregnable facade sometimes masked an internal fragility. Ultimately, the Japanese castle was a powerful, multi-layered symbol. It was a fortress, a home, a seat of power, and a cultural artifact. But more than anything, it was a testament to humanity's enduring quest for security, for order, and for a tangible representation of its own resilience in the face of an uncertain world. It asks you to reflect. What are the castles of our own time? What structures, physical or abstract, do we build to symbolize our control, our security, and our aspirations for order? And how truly impregnable are they? The imposing symbolism of the castle, its layers of physical and implied control, subtly yet profoundly influenced the daily life and psychology of those who dwelt within its shadow. Whether high-ranking samurai or the lowliest servants, you gain a deeper appreciation for the unique mental landscape shaped by constant proximity to such a formidable and demanding structure. For the samurai, The castle was not just their workplace, it was their identity, their home, and often their entire world. Their lives were meticulously ordered, dictated by the castle's rhythms and the daimyo's commands. This bred a profound sense of duty and discipline, almost a monastic dedication to their role. Their stoicism, often observed in their bearing and martial arts, was not merely a cultural ideal but a necessary psychological adaptation to a life lived under constant scrutiny and the ever-present possibility of conflict. You sense the quiet intensity, the internalized vigilance that became second nature, the constant proximity to power. However, also fostered a pervasive sense of conformity and hierarchy. Every individual knew their place, their rank, and the precise protocols for interacting with those above and below them. Ambition was often expressed indirectly, through diligent service and subtle maneuvering, rather than overt challenge. The fear of displeasing the daimyo, or of losing face within the rigid social structure, was a powerful motivator, shaping behavior and suppressing open dissent. Is it possible for innovation or true self-expression to flourish under such a pervasive pressure to conform? For the servants and artisans, their lives were equally structured by the castle's needs. They operated within its confines. Their skills essential for its daily functioning, from the cooks who prepared meals, to the cleaners who maintained hygiene, to the carpenters who repaired wooden structures. Their labor was often invisible, yet indispensable. They lived in the shadow of power, their existence intertwined with the daimyo's fortunes, often viewing the castle as both a source of livelihood and a formidable, sometimes oppressive, presence. You hear the quiet sounds of their daily toil, the rustle of straw, the distant clang of a bucket. The castle's very security, while offering protection, also subtly implied a state of perpetual readiness for war. The heavy gates, the vigilant guards, the strategic positioning of watchtowers, these elements were a constant reminder of external threats. This bred a collective mindset of preparedness and resilience. Even in peacetime, the shadow of conflict loomed, influencing decisions about resource management, military training, and alliances. The psychological burden of this constant readiness, the quiet anticipation of the unknown, must have been immense. Yet, amidst this gravity, there were also moments of profound connection and shared identity. The castle became a focal point for communal life, a place where festivals were celebrated, and where the sense of belonging to a larger entity, the clan, the domain, was powerfully reinforced. The shared experiences of hardship, defense, and the pursuit of a common goal forged deep bonds, a sense of collective purpose that transcended individual roles. You witnessed the fleeting moments of camaraderie, the shared laughter in the barracks, the quiet solace found in mutual understanding. Ultimately, the medieval Japanese castle was more than just a physical structure. It was a psychological crucible, shaping the minds and spirits of all who lived within its sphere of influence. It fostered a unique blend of discipline, hierarchy, vigilance, and collective identity, a complex interplay of internal and external pressures. It compels you to ask, how do the environments we inhabit, even today, subtly mold our thoughts, our behaviors, and our very understanding of ourselves and our place in the world? And are we always aware of the walls, visible or invisible, that define our existence? The intricate psychological landscape of the castle, shaped by its walls and its internal dynamics, was often punctuated by events that transcended the mundane, moments steeped in the mysticism and forgotten lore of the Middle Ages. You are now drawn into the deeper currents of belief that permeated this era, where the visible world was merely a thin veil over unseen forces, and where ancient traditions held profound sway. Consider the pervasive presence of Shinto, Japan's indigenous spiritual practice, interwoven with the more formal structures of Buddhism. Within the castle grounds, or in nearby forests, you might find small shrines marked by torii gates, dedicated to local kami deities or spirits. These were not just places of worship, but focal points for community prayers, for good harvests, protection from disease, or victory in battle. The very land upon which the castle stood was believed to possess its own spirit, requiring appeasement and respect. The building of the castle itself would have been accompanied by elaborate purification rituals, ensuring the benevolent favor of the kami. The natural world, often harsh and unpredictable, was viewed with a profound sense of awe and apprehension. Forests were not merely sources of timber, but places where spirits resided, where unseen creatures roamed, and where lost travelers might encounter supernatural phenomena. Mountains were sacred, often home to hermits and ascetics who sought enlightenment through rigorous spiritual practice. You imagine the rustle of leaves in a dark grove, the echoing calls of nocturnal birds, and the whispers of unseen presences that might fill the minds of those guarding the castle walls at night. Even within the castle, specific objects or locations could acquire a mystical significance. A particular well, an ancient tree, a hidden chamber. These might be believed to possess protective spirits, or to be places where the boundary between worlds thinned. Charms and talismans were commonly employed, worn by samurai for protection in battle, or hung in strategic locations to ward off evil spirits or bad fortune. You see the intricate designs, the delicate craftsmanship that went into these small, potent objects, reflecting a deep-seated need to connect with forces beyond the tangible. The role of religious figures within this context was vital. Buddhist monks, often influential advisors to the daimyo, offered spiritual guidance, philosophical insights, and sometimes even practical strategic advice drawn from their broad knowledge. Temples, often situated near castles, served as centers of learning, repositories of scrolls and ancient wisdom, and places of refuge during times of war. Their presence provided a moral and spiritual anchor in a frequently brutal world, offering solace and meaning amidst the impermanence of life. The cycles of the moon, the turning of the seasons, the behavior of animals, all were observed not just for their practical implications, but for omens and portents. Divination, though perhaps less formalized than in some other cultures, was still a practice consulted when making critical decisions, seeking to align human actions with the perceived will of the cosmos. The unpredictability of life fostered a deep reliance on the unseen, a constant search for patterns and meanings beyond the obvious. This blending of the mundane and the mystical, the practical and the spiritual, created a rich tapestry of belief that profoundly shaped the medieval mind. It reminds you that the boundaries between science, religion, and daily life were far more fluid than in your modern world. It compels you to consider what unseen forces, what unacknowledged beliefs, continue to shape our own decisions and perceptions, even when we believe ourselves to be purely rational. Perhaps the stone was never outside the spiritual realm at all, but always deeply embedded within it. The deep immersion in mysticism and the belief in unseen forces often intersected with the stark realities of power, creating an environment where ancient philosophies were not merely abstract concepts, but practical guides, especially for the daimyo and his inner circle. You begin to understand how the wisdom of ages, particularly from China, filtered through Buddhist and native Japanese interpretations, provided a framework for governance, strategy, and even personal conduct. Consider the profound influence of Zen Buddhism beyond its spiritual practices of meditation and mindfulness. Zen instilled a philosophy of self-discipline, direct action, and an acceptance of impermanence. For the samurai, this translated into unwavering courage in battle, the ability to act without hesitation, and a stoic acceptance of death. The practice of zazen-seated meditation was not just for monks. Many samurai practiced it to cultivate mental clarity, emotional control, and a detached perspective on life's inevitable suffering. You can almost feel the quiet intensity of their concentration, the pursuit of inner stillness amidst the external chaos. Alongside Zen, the strategic philosophies of ancient China, notably those found in texts like Sun Tzu's The Art of War, were meticulously studied and applied. These were not just military manuals. They were treatises on leadership, deception, and the psychological dimensions of conflict, the emphasis on knowing oneself and one's enemy, on winning without fighting, on using subterfuge and surprise. These were principles that resonated deeply with the intricate political landscape of medieval Japan. The daimyo would have read and reread these texts, seeking deeper insights into the subtle art of governance and warfare. This intellectual pursuit, hidden within the castle's quiet studies, was as potent a weapon as any sword. These ancient philosophies provided a moral and strategic compass in a world often characterized by brutal pragmatism. They offered a path to enlightenment or effective leadership, a way to navigate the treacherous currents of power without succumbing entirely to base impulses. They encouraged introspection, critical thinking, and a long-term perspective that extended beyond immediate gains. The castle, in this sense, was not just a military stronghold, but also a school, a place where wisdom was cultivated and passed down. However, the application of these profound philosophies was rarely pure. They were often adapted, sometimes contorted, to justify the harsh realities of feudal rule, the pursuit of power, and the violence inherent in their society. The concept of compassion in Bushido, for example, often applied primarily to one's own clan or allies, rarely extending to defeated enemies or the common folk. The philosophical ideal often collided with the stark demands of survival and political expediency. This tension between lofty principles and grim realities is a hallmark of human history. The forgotten lore, too, played a subtle role. Tales of legendary warriors, mythical creatures, and ancient heroes were not merely entertainment. They were moral lessons, cautionary tales, and sources of inspiration. These narratives reinforced cultural values, the importance of honor, courage, and loyalty, and provided a shared cultural identity. They were the stories whispered by mothers to children, chanted by storytellers in the barracks, shaping the collective consciousness. Ultimately, the intellectual and spiritual life within the castle walls reveals a profound human capacity for introspection and strategic thought, even amidst profound challenges. It highlights how humans throughout history have sought meaning and guidance beyond mere physical survival. It makes you ponder, in our modern age, with its vast repositories of information, do we still truly engage with ancient wisdom, or do we too often dismiss it as irrelevant, perhaps losing invaluable insights into the enduring patterns of human nature and power? The intricate interplay of ancient philosophies and the harsh realities of medieval life within the castle walls constantly prompted unanswerable questions, the kind that echo across centuries, demanding contemplation, you find yourself standing at the nexus of these profound queries, observing the human condition as it grappled with forces both grand and intimate. Can the world, with its entrenched hierarchies, its cycles of violence, and its seemingly unyielding traditions, truly be changed? The daimyo might wage war for territorial expansion, seeking to alter the map of Japan, yet the fundamental structure of feudalism, the rigid class system, the perennial struggle for resources, these endured. The castle itself, a symbol of control, was also a monument to the cyclical nature of power, built, besieged, perhaps rebuilt, only to face the same challenges anew. You witness generations living out similar patterns, driven by similar ambitions and fears. Does history truly progress, or does it merely repeat its fundamental lessons in different costumes? Consider the human yearning for hidden wisdom and secret knowledge. Why this persistent fascination with that which is concealed? Was it simply a practical desire for advantage, for a secret weapon or a hidden truth that could sway the tides of war or politics? Or was it a deeper, more spiritual impulse, a quest for a fundamental understanding of existence, a belief that true enlightenment lay beyond the obvious, in the esoteric corners of forgotten lore? You see the meticulous care taken with ancient scrolls, the hushed tones when discussing prophecies or clandestine information. This pursuit suggests an inherent dissatisfaction with the surface of reality, a perpetual human drive to penetrate deeper meanings. What, then, of beauty in such a brutal world? Why did the warrior, capable of unspeakable violence, also cultivate an exquisite appreciation for the delicate curve of a tea bowl, the ephemeral beauty of a cherry blossom, or the precise composition of a painted screen? Was it a form of escape, a refuge from the harshness of their lives? Or was it an intrinsic human need, a recognition that even amidst destruction, the impulse to create and to find harmony persists? The presence of beauty within the fortified walls suggests that the human spirit, even when constrained by practical necessity, will always seek to elevate, to transcend, to find grace. The constant concern with security and locks, and the pervasive threat of poison, speaks volumes about the nature of human relationships in this era. If one's life and power relied so heavily on physical and metaphorical locks, what did that say about the trust, or lack thereof, between individuals? The hidden bolt, the taste tester, the whispered rumor. These were not merely tools. They were symptoms of a profound societal anxiety, a constant vigilance against betrayal from within. Is true security ever achievable when the greatest threat lies not outside the walls, but in the heart of another human being? And finally, the relentless focus on practical survival and daily life challenges: fire, food, shelter, hygiene. These were not intellectual exercises. They were the raw, visceral demands of existence. Yet, in addressing them, immense ingenuity was unleashed. The simple well, the effective hoe, the resilient thatched roof. These demonstrate a profound human capacity for adaptation and resilience. They remind you that progress is often born not from grand theories, but from the immediate, pressing needs of daily life. How much of our own modern comfort, you muse, is built upon the forgotten, painstaking solutions to these fundamental problems, solved by anonymous hands in a distant past? These questions linger, suspended in the quiet air of the medieval castle, reaching out across the centuries. They are not merely historical inquiries, but timeless reflections on the enduring paradoxes of the human spirit, its capacity for both creation and destruction, its yearning for beauty amidst ugliness, its search for truth in a world of illusion. and its unyielding struggle for survival and meaning dot the questions you've pondered. These echoes from a distant age now begin to coalesce, drawing you back to the present moment, yet leaving you imbued with the silent wisdom gleaned from the castle of whispering stones. The journey through its sturdy walls, its intricate defenses, and the very spirit of its inhabitants concludes not with a dramatic flourish, but with a quiet understanding, a metaphorical return to the beginning, enriched by what has been observed. You started at the castle's precipice, observing its formidable silhouette against the dawn. Now, as the last shadows of the medieval era recede, you understand that its true essence was never merely in its timber and stone. It was in the human hands that shaped it, the human minds that conceived its defenses, and the human hearts that beat within its confines, hearts filled with ambition, loyalty, fear, and a persistent, often unacknowledged, yearning for meaning. The hidden wisdom and secret knowledge, once guarded within ancient scrolls and whispered conversations, are now unveiled, not as mystical formulas, but as the enduring patterns of human behavior, the psychology of power, the necessity of vigilance, the subtle art of communication, and the timeless pursuit of knowledge itself. You realize that the secrets were often simply practical solutions, honed by necessity and passed down through generations, rather than arcane incantations. The practical survival challenges, once so immediate and visceral: fire, food, shelter, hygiene, reveal a profound appreciation for human ingenuity and resilience. Every simple tool, every careful storage method, every act of communal effort speaks volumes about our ancestors' ability to adapt, to innovate, and to thrive against immense odds. It reminds you that true progress is often incremental, built upon the foundations of countless unsung efforts, the social dynamics and performance, the intricate dance of hierarchy and honor, now appear less as quaint historical customs and more as reflections of an enduring human tendency to categorize, to display, and to navigate complex social structures. The pursuit of beauty, in its most refined forms, was not a luxury but a testament to the human spirit's capacity for transcendence, a quiet rebellion against the harshness of existence, a reminder that even in a world defined by conflict, the aesthetic impulse persists. The development and significance of security and locks, from the simple wooden bar to the cunningly warded padlock, underscore the timeless human desire for protection, for boundaries, and for the safeguarding of what is valued. Yet, the subtle, often deadly, role of poison in power dynamics simultaneously reveals the inherent fragility of all security, a stark reminder that the greatest threats often come not from outside, but from within the very fabric of trust. So, you are left with these quiet reflections, seeing the modern world through a lens tempered by the medieval, the corporate boardrooms, the political arenas, the digital networks. Are they not, in their own way, complex castles, guarding information, managing resources, and navigating subtle power plays? Are the challenges of trust and betrayal, of security and vulnerability, so fundamentally different? Perhaps the stone was never outside, but always within us, the builders, the inhabitants, the observers. The lessons learned from the castle were never merely about its physical structure, but about the enduring human spirit that animated it, that wrestled with its limitations, and that found ways to persist, to create, and to question. And maybe, just maybe, the journey was the transformation all along. Not a dramatic shift, but a quiet, internal realignment, a deeper appreciation for the foundations upon which our present reality stands. So if gold was never the point, What was perhaps it was the understanding itself, the quiet realization that the echoes of the past are not just history, but a continuous whisper of human experience, perpetually asking, perpetually teaching, perpetually being. The castle, in its timeless silence, has simply offered you a moment to listen